Settle in because Mona Scott just made the world gasp with a move that will have hip-hop and love fans saying, "Wait, what?" Yes, you read correctly. Young Jock, Rasheeda, and Kirk Frost are the only people being let go by Mona Scott. And no, this has nothing to do with the drama of the most recent season or any kind of publicity stunt. This is authentic. The key query, though, is why. What might have been the tipping point that caused the mastermind behind it all, Mona Scott, to turn on her own stars in this way? Was it Kirk's recent antics about not showing up? Behind the scenes, is Rasheeda attempting to play puppet master? Or were there serious concerns raised by Kirk and young Jock's dubious covert meetings? Are we going to see a full-scale war on reality TV? And here's the thing. There's reportedly more drama developing off-camera than ever before. Is this scandal more complex than it first appears? We're going into explosive details that you won't hear anyplace else, so stay tuned. Perhaps the greatest power maneuver in reality TV history was just executed by Mona Scott. Keep in mind that this is only the beginning. Hold on to your seats because what we're about to share will completely change your perception of Atlanta's love and hip-hop scene. The show's queen, Mona Scott, recently made a move that is shocking the entertainment industry. Kirk, Rasheeda, and young Jock, some of the show's biggest stars, were just dismissed by her. It's not for the reasons you believe either. Behind the scenes, this story has been simmering for months and is full of intrigue, betrayal, and power struggles. And believe me, this is not something you want to miss. Although Mona Scott has always had a no-nonsense mentality, she has gone overboard this time. It wasn't a sudden decision to fire Kirk, Rasheeda, and young Jock. It was the result of years of ego conflicts, backstage drama, and keeping too many secrets for comfort. The most shocking thing, though, is that they weren't dismissed for misbehaving on site. Oh no, this is part of a far larger plot. There is more to this than a few tardy people and occasional outbursts. It has to do with loyalty or the absence of it. Let's dissect this. Let's start with Kirk, who has been a mainstay on Love and Hip Hop Atlanta for many years. As everybody who has followed the show knows, Kirk hasn't exactly behaved in an admirable manner. However, it goes beyond the typical bad boy antics. He wasn't simply avoiding the production crew, missing calls, and arriving late. He was deliberately ruining the whole show. Imagine a man who acts as though everyone should adapt to his schedule, missing calls from the production team and network, and arriving hours late because he believes he is untouchable. To put it simply, that's Kirk. Mona, however, had had enough. She was aware that a message needed to be sent if Kirk continued to treat the show as an afterthought. Either you follow the procedure or you're fired. Let's now discuss Rasheeda, the hip-hop and love princess. Although Rasheeda is renowned for her commanding presence on television, she was attempting to execute some significant power plays off-screen. Like Kirk, Rasheeda began to insist on the direction of the story. She wasn't satisfied with her position alone. She desired command over the whole narrative. Rasheeda refused to film the scenes that didn't fit her version of events. Thus, she wasn't turning up for them. She desired to pull the strings herself. She desired to direct the course of the performance. She manipulated the situation to her advantage by pressuring Mona to make changes. Mona, however, would not have any of it. Behind the scenes, Rasheeda's incessant demands were creating stress, and Mona wasn't going to give her star the impression that she could take over. This was manipulation on a whole new level. Rasheeda's refusal to film wasn't the only thing. Mona Scott was seeing right through her attempts to completely change the show's plot. This had nothing to do with a few poor workdays. It involved a total disregard for the group and, above all, for Mona's goal. Rasheeda has no place on the show if she wasn't going to follow the guidelines. Additionally, Mona cannot change her mind once she makes a decision. Two of the show's most influential characters, Kirk and Rasheeda, are now pulling strings and behaving as though the production crew is under their control. But you know what? There's more. The man who has been a bit of a wild card on the show. Young Jack comes on. relationship with Kirk was a recipe for disaster, even if he wasn't as well known for on-set drama. These two were partners in crime rather than merely co-stars. Behind the scenes, young Jack and Kirk turned into the most ruthless thieves. They were discussing more than just their on-screen personas. They were planning what to do next. Let's just say that things get nasty when you start planning to harm Mona Scott. What was this scheme then? Young Jock and Kirk weren't only a couple of naughty boys looking to stir up trouble. Oh no, they were negotiating with other networks to create a brand new program that had nothing to do with Mona Scott, in order to establish a completely unique platform for themselves. They intended to exclude Mona. Yes, exactly. Their conversation wasn't simply behind Mona's back. They were making a concerted effort to replace her. If you think this is suspicious, you're right. And being the astute producer that she is, Mona was fully aware of what was taking place. When Kirk and young Jock's dubious actions escalated from rumors to outright drama, it was the last straw. The main character of this entire mess is Kendra, whose name you'll hear a lot in the upcoming chapter. Kendra had relationships with Kirk and young Jock that were unpopular with their partners, Jock's wife and Rasheeda, respectively. Things were rapidly getting hotter as rumors circulated over the nature of their ties. Rasheeda was offended by some of Kirk's dubious remarks regarding Kendra. This controversy actually developed into a significant off-camera plot point, and it was on the verge of blowing up. When the drama eventually spilled onto the set, things took a turn for the worst. We're discussing full-fledged fights. Rasheeda began criticizing the show's creators, saying it was phony and insisting that some sequences be reshot to support her story. The drama on film wasn't the only thing. It was leaking into the actual framing process. Security had to be summoned because the altercation became so heated. And Kirk even had the gall to attempt to halt the filming by requesting that the cameras be switched off. There was nothing Mona could do now. Mona Scott suddenly squeezed the trigger after the line had been crossed. She canceled their contracts. No definitive episode. There are no heartfelt farewells, just a chilly calculated "you're out." News spread quickly. Fire. And people were incredulous. How could the creator of these stars, Mona, have allowed them to leave so readily? However, the show wasn't the only factor in Mona's choice. It was about loyalty, respect, and keeping her empire under control. Mona was done playing games. Kirk, Rasheeda, and young Jock had all gone too far. She refused to allow anyone to undermine her show's vision. The whole entertainment industry was in disbelief as Mona Scott executed those contracts. Losing a couple stars wasn't all that was involved. Hip-Hop Atlanta, the program that had dominated reality TV for years, and Love were about to collapse. People, let's be honest. You had better be ready to face the repercussions when you start to play tricks on Mona and Kirk. Rasheeda and young Jock were going to have to learn the hard way that betrayal of this nature never comes back. What actually transpired behind closed doors, then? Well, the unnamed people who have been leaking information have given me the inside scoop. You won't believe the depths of this drama, I promise. Let's begin with Rasheeda and Kirk. We were unaware of the fact that these two weren't merely attempting to change the plot of the show. They were conspiring in secret to undermine Mona's authority over the Love and Hip Hop franchise as a whole. Rumors began to circulate that Kirk and Rasheeda had been contacting competing networks as their actions grew increasingly unpredictable. The objective is a new reality program that would allow them to shine without being held back by Mona's strict control. Yes, exactly. The same show that made them renowned was being undermined. This was more than a straightforward power struggle. The woman who had granted them their platforms was blatantly betrayed. The tale doesn't stop there, though. These two were likewise attempting to portray themselves as victims. Specifically, Rasheeda started spreading accusations that the network wasn't treating her fairly. She said that her scenes were deliberately edited to make her appear unflattering by the production crew. She became increasingly irritated and began to insist on having more control over her story. She didn't want to be a part of the narrative. She wanted to be the one telling it. Rasheeda became furious and attempted to mobilize the other cast members against Mona's vision after Mona rejected her pleas. Kirk did not improve. It was evident from his tardiness and persistent avoidance of calls that he no longer wanted to be a member of the team. However, Mona was unaware at the time that Kirk had been having meetings with producers from different networks. In the background, he and Young Jack were developing their own program with the covert intention of excluding Mona entirely. However, Mona acted immediately after learning about it. Since Young Jock's involvement is where things get really intriguing, let's now discuss him. You see, the drama between Kirk and Rasheeda was held together by Young Jock. He ensured that the tensions never subsided by continuously stoking the flames. Jock was also the one who persuaded Rasheeda and Kirks that they could continue without Mona by whispering lovely falsehoods into their ears. Here's the worst part, though. Not only was Young Jock causing mischief on Atlanta's hip hop and love, he and Kirk were actively plotting to start their own show. In an attempt to reach an agreement, they had already scheduled meetings with producers from other networks. In the meantime, however, they were conspiring behind Mona's back while feigning loyalty. Best of all, Kendra, the same Kendra who had been at the center of all the drama in their relationship, was being used as a pawn in Jock and Kirk's scheme. They purposefully fanned the flames to keep the attention on them since they knew that the public would be keenly following the Kendra drama. Playing both sides, they were covertly planning their getaway while pretending that everything was good on Love and Hip Hop. Then the day of fate arrived. The day Mona Scott discovered what occurred behind her back. After a huge shakeup in production and a call to security, Mona lost it just as the cameras started rolling. On set lately, Rasheeda had become a bit of a wild card. After months of causing needless conflict with the producers and refusing to film parts she didn't like, when she exploded during a filming session, it was her last blow. She attacked the producers, accusing them of attempting to manipulate her image, and branded the scene phony. Rasheeda was now totally out of control, and the staff was in disarray. Due to her outburst, Kirk even attempted to block the cameras from filming, and security had to intervene. At that point, Mona had sufficient. She came to the conclusion that these two had no place on Love and Hip Hop Atlanta any longer if they were prepared to go so far as to publicly humiliate the crew, undermine the direction of the program, and actively work against the network. Made a public announcement and quickly terminated their contracts. The show is bigger than anyone. There's more, though. Young Jock and Kirk were not finished yet. They believed they could leave without Mona being fully aware of their intentions. However, Mona would not allow them to get away with it so easily. Mona's next move was ruthless and well thought out. She leaked information about Kirk and Jock's covert meetings with other networks by using her insider connections. The press went crazy. Public opinion was shifting against the fired stars as a result of Mona Scott's betrayal, which had reached unprecedented levels. The same supporters who had previously backed Kirk, Rasheeda, and Jock now viewed them as liars, opportunists, and traitors. The fans were consuming Mona's preparations for the next major scandal. She was not going to leave them in peace. Mona wasn't merely defending her reputation. She was telling the world about their lies. Nobody is allowed to play Mona. Scott is. A fool. Not when she was watching. The ramifications grew more severe as the conflict between Young Jock, Kirk, Rasheeda, and Mona Scott developed. Mona was no longer merely observing from the sidelines. She exposed the betrayal and pulled strings behind the scenes, completely controlling the story. The subsequent events were nothing short of explosive. The press went crazy. The supporters were furious, and Mona's influence was solidified. Everyone was now aware that Mona Scott's fury could not be avoided. However, the real effects of what Kirk, Rasheeda, and Jock had done were just starting to show. The people were incensed that the betrayal was now public knowledge. It was obvious that Mona wasn't simply dismissing them. Their careers were being destroyed by her. The networks that had been surreptitiously pursuing Kirk and Jock abruptly had to reverse course. They understood that their own reputations may suffer greatly if they sided with these two. In addition to having the ability to manipulate the media, Mona also enjoyed the allegiance of a sizable fan base that was now keen to see Kirk, Rasheeda, and Jock fail. However, the consequences did not. There it became evident that legal repercussions were imminent as the controversy grew. Kirk, Jock, and Rasheeda may have believed they could get away with it, but justice was being served gradually. The news. Organizations that had been providing fuel. Sources who had collaborated closely with the three were drawn in as the fire began to spread farther. Soon after, leaked videos, shocking interviews, and even anonymous whistleblowers started to come to light, exposing even more of the covert gold these celebrities had been concealing. Rumor had it that Kirk and Jock weren't merely attempting to land their own program. Their goal was to pilfer Mona's whole love and hip-hop recipe. By promising them better agreements and more control, they were even enticing other TV stars to join their new venture. But Mona wasn't going to give them that kind of break. She wasn't playing checkers. She was playing chess. She had the support of her supporters and was a master at manipulating the media. She skillfully crafted her own story, taking advantage of the drama. As the victim of all of this, Mona was suddenly viewed as a fearless risk-taker and a strong businesswoman. Her popularity in the media caused Love and Hip Hop Atlanta's ratings to soar. However, Mona wasn't just focused on her brand behind the scenes, and she was getting ready for the next big step. She began reorganizing the Love and Hip Hop empire when Kirk, Rasheeda, and Jock were fully exposed. She was tidying up the house, creating certain that anyone with dubious allegiance was excluded. You were eliminated if you failed the loyalty test. Let's now discuss Kendra's subsequent events. Kendra had been enmeshed in all of the drama between Kirk and Rasheeda, as everyone is aware. She had turned into a pawn in the power game, though, something many people were unaware of. Kendra was unaware that she was being used as leverage, and Kirk had been playing both sides. However, Kendra was further entangled in the problem when the facts about the dubious activities with other networks surfaced. Her career suffered greatly as a result of being cut off from all the major players. She was no longer a desirable collaborator. She had been a casualty of Kirk and Jack's ascent to the summit. For Kendra, this was more than a small setback. There was a complete collapse. She was now viewed by the public as simply another victim of the betrayal, and she would not be able to avoid the criticism for long. The impact on Kirk and Rasheeda's personal lives was profound. Rasheeda's rants and refusal to work with production had already put her brand in danger. However, her reputation suffered greatly as the public learned about the covert show plot and the deceptive tactics. Rasheeda has previously been among the most prominent and well-respected characters in the program. But now all of that was at risk. At the same time, Kirk was utterly alone. He was no longer able to hide behind his good guy character. His and Rasheeda's relationship was in ruins. His reputation had gone from being well-liked to being totally damaged, and his future in the field was questionable. Oh boy, young Jock. Jock believed he could escape unharmed, but he was also dealing with the consequences. Even though he had been an expert manipulator during the entire ordeal, he was unable to escape the repercussions of his conduct. Jock's career had been booming, but now that his role in the backstabbing scheme was known, he was cut off from the individuals he had depended on. One enormous, unavoidable fact resulted from all of this. Mona Scott had prevailed, and the treachery was genuine. She had taken back command of the story, utterly demolished her enemies, and exposed their deception by using their own schemes against them. She had established herself as the undisputed driving force behind hip-hop and love. However, the consequences went beyond Kirk, Rasheeda, and Jock losing their jobs. What this meant for love and hip-hop? Atlanta's future was now the real question. Mona had had to make a difficult choice, although she knew that the viewers would be closely observing her to see how she handled the situation. She had to purge the show of anyone who might be working behind her back. Was this the start of a new chapter in her life, or would she continue with the show? Mona was obviously not finished cleaning the house. It became evident to the audience that more stars would be eliminated as they observed the fallout. The only thing that mattered now was loyalty. It had been a plain and loud statement. Your career was over when you crossed Mona Scott. It's quite the roller coaster. The truth has been revealed by Mona Scott, and it's now evident that in the reality TV industry, treachery doesn't pay off. The true question, though, is what will happen after all of this drama and mayhem. Will this controversy ever be resolved for Kirk, Rasheeda, and young Jock? Or is this moment in the spotlight permanent? Don't miss a single update if you're as shocked as we are. We'll continue to provide you with the most up-to-date, juicy stories as they happen. So press the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. We would also want to hear from you. How do you feel about the bold decision made by Mona Scott? Was it warranted? Or is she merely engaging in risky behavior? Let's discuss your ideas in the comments section below. Pay attention to the drama.
Thank you.